Salutations to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be around the world. I'm here right now to talk spontaneously and briefly about a matter that concerns me deeply. I would say it is one of the top 5 concerns of my entire life. And I've had occasion over the last 8 months, since the Rona fraud has been running, to come out and say something about this matter. So I'm choosing this moment to do so. The aim of this message is simple. I'm here to tell you what the globalist masterminds know that you don't. And in fact, if I'm correct, you may conclude that the success of their plan, which is by no means guaranteed, don't ever think that, but the success of their plan rests greatly upon them knowing something that you don't know. So what would that be? Well, look at what's happening in the response across the world to the Rona fraud. First of all, it is being revealed as a fraud. And there is pushback from the legal angle. There is pushback and opposition and refutation of the entire narrative by medical experts. And there are protests going on in many places around the world. And when you look at these protests, you find that there is a common theme. People are protesting the violation of their rights. And they are protesting that their rights are actually being taken away. So it is one thing if I violate a right of yours, and it's another thing, even more grave, if I simply take away that right. I don't allow you to have that right. So, for instance, if you're driving down the road and I pull you over in a police vehicle, then I am violating your right to travel freely. But if I enforce other measures, I make it impossible for you to travel at all, to move freely. And in that sense, I am taking away your right. So both cases apply, of course, obviously, to what's going on today. In order to enforce the Rona fraud and to bring in the Great Reset and the program of the transhumanist, technocratic, globalist, criminal elite, in order to do all that, they have to take away people's rights, the right to associate freely, the right to protest against them taking away your rights, the right to make your own sovereign decisions about your health, the right not to be forced to have vaccinations, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. It could run into 50 different examples easily, couldn't it? So just take a moment and consider all of this protest about losing our rights. Do you stand in that crowd? Do you stand in that group of people who are protesting about losing your rights as this nefarious and deceitful and murderous program rolls on? Are you in that crowd? You may be, you may well be. There are a lot of good, decent, honest people of conscience in that crowd, and they are protesting the loss, the violation or loss of their rights. But I'm here to tell you that there's something wrong, basically wrong, in that tsunami of protest. There's something basically erroneous about it that actually plays enormously into the favor of the globalist masterminds. You see, they know something that most people don't know. As far as I can tell, most people don't know it because I haven't heard anyone speak in exactly the way that I'm going to speak in a moment. I've heard people talk about God-given rights and natural rights, and those who talk in that way always frame their argument in the same way. They say, we as human animals basically and intrinsically have God-given rights and natural rights, and they must be observed and respected and preserved so that we can live here in this human world together. But there's something wrong with that viewpoint. And the globalist masterminds know it's wrong. And whenever they hear people protesting for their rights or complaining about losing their rights, I can pretty much assure you that they just laugh. They just laugh it off. Why do they laugh it off? You might think they do because they have the money and the power and the influence to do whatever they want, and so they completely disregard your rights. It doesn't matter to them that you have rights because they have the power and money that allows them to steamroll completely over your rights. But that's not it. It's worse than that. They laugh because they know that you're deluded if you think you have rights. No one really has any rights. And that's what they know that you don't know. I put it in that way. I'm not accosting or accusing you, but I'm using the second person to speak to you directly. To put it otherwise, I would say that the enormous majority of people in the world right now in this crisis do not know that protesting against their rights being taken away is futile because they don't have any rights to lose in the first place. This is what the globalist masterminds know, and you don't, or many people don't. So I repeat, I personally consider it to be a most serious issue that the general population of the world does not realize that they have no rights, that no one has any rights. In order to realize that, they would have to look at the concept of rights in a different way than they do now. So I'm going to talk a little about that change, that different point of view regarding rights, to conclude this short talk. Consider for a moment the expression, God-given rights. Many people stand very firmly on that concept, don't they? That concept is absurd. There cannot be any God-given rights. Do you know of any instance when God appeared or manifested to the world in a tangible form, perceptible to human beings, and dictated to its human audience what their rights are? I don't know of any instance of that. I know, of course, of the biblical legend, which is a complete and deceptive fairy tale, that, for instance, Moses on Mount Sinai spoke to God and received the Ten Commandments and then wrote them down on tablets of stone. But in any case where any religion claims that there are rights given by God, God has never been present directly to dictate those rights or to define them. It has always been men, usually old bearded men, old patriarchs, control freaks, who claim that they spoke to God and God informed them of certain commandments to be followed and certain rights that could be enjoyed by his subjects, the subjects of the Creator God. Consider again the alternative term. Well, natural rights. Well, what in the world are natural rights? Have you ever taken a walk in the woods and listened to the wind in the trees, listening to the babbling brook, with the birds singing, the animals? Have you been anywhere in nature where you've listened to the sounds of nature? And have you ever heard nature define or describe a set of human rights? I don't think so. The fact that you and I are born in the habitat of the earth, of the planet Earth, that we are creatures in the matrix of life of the earth and we belong to the natural world, does not necessarily prove in any way that the natural world contains rights. How would you possibly derive natural rights? What is the source? Once again, the source of natural rights or God-given rights or any kind of rights you want to concoct or imagine is the same in all cases. Someone, some individual, usually a male patriarch type figure, at some time stated these rights. So what are human rights? They're nothing but the inventions of certain human beings who, and you don't have to look too deeply to see this, have an authoritarian complex. So obviously, if I am the authority who tells you what your rights are, that might seem like I'm doing a really good thing for you, wouldn't it? It might seem so. Well, maybe not so. Because in fact, by posing as the authority who defines your rights for you, I have authority over you. It's a sneaky way to have authority over you. Everyone has heard about the such grandiose documents as the, what is it called? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights coming from the United Nations. Well, just because some people formed the United Nations and wrote a paper, and on that paper they listed certain universal human rights, doesn't mean that those rights exist other than anything as a fiction on paper. So what the globalist masterminds know, my friends, is that they are not taking any of your rights away, and they are not violating any of your rights, because you don't have any rights in the first place. Now, all that may seem rather extreme, and you may not agree with me, which is fine. You have the right not to agree. Ha ha ha. No, you don't have a right not to agree. You and I can have an agreement. You and I can have an agreement. And we can say, in a friendly way, fair and open, look, we're going to have conversations. We're going to be friends and we're going to have conversations. And let's agree that we can have different views and we can disagree with each other. So what have we done? We have made an agreement. That's real. That's existential. Rights do not exist. There are only agreements. Agreements and the responsibilities that come with keeping those agreements. That's what really exists. That is what really constitutes the fabric and the structure and framework of the social contract. It's not rights. It's agreements and responsibilities to hold those agreements. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't made any agreements with Klaus Schwab or Bill Gates or Elon Musk or any other of the many globalist masterminds who are on the front stage. There are many others backstage that we don't know about. But I haven't made an agreement with them, for instance. I haven't made an agreement with Klaus Schwab that I would like to have my life, my personal life, and that of my country and my nation, and indeed the entire world, run according to the program of the Great Reset. I haven't made that agreement. Therefore, Klaus Schwab, in my reality, is not permitted to do that. But I don't say he doesn't have a right to do that, because rights have nothing to do with it. And he knows that. They all know it's a big joke to the insiders of the globalist, internationalist, technocratic, transhumanist, criminal cabal. Why are politicians always laughing when they stand up and lie to the public and pretend to represent the people and thereby to uphold the rights of the people and flagrantly and openly do things that violate those rights? Why are they laughing and smiling? Because they know that you don't have any rights to violate. So, that being said, I'll close with the good news. But first, just for comic effect, let me reiterate the bad news. No one has any rights. You do not have a right to speak. You do not have a right to breathe. You do not have a right to associate with other human animals. You do not have a right to live. That is the brutal existential truth. And within that truth is the opportunity for a tremendous liberation of human society, one person at a time. You see, when you can really face the fact that rights are nothing but a fiction that has been invented by authorities as one of their many tools of deceit and control, then you can step into the freedom of knowing that it's fine. It's no problem. You don't have any rights? No problem. You don't need them. You don't need rights. You don't need a right to live. You don't need a right to speak your mind. You don't need a right that gives you permission to drive a car, to travel across the world, to associate with anyone that you want, to take care of your own health, to criticize the government, to protest against lies in society. You don't need a right to do any of those things. All you need is what you already have, the freedom to act. You don't need a right to be free. If you think you need a right to be free, then you're living in an illusion of freedom. All that matters is your freedom to act. And as Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, said, you are not free not to be free. So you are free. Act like you're free. Now, it's true that if you go out in the world today and you act freely and you don't wear a mask, you risk a reaction. But that doesn't mean you are not free to not wear a mask. It just means that you're living in a monumental social crisis, unseen and unparalleled in human history, in which if you proceed to act in your freedom to do the most simple things that make life livable and enjoyable, you face the risk that somebody is going to interfere with you and someone may come at you with a punitive and a suppressing or violent action. But that is the reality of the world that we live in. But you are still free to do whatever you choose to do. You are not free not to be free. And you do not need any right defined by anyone, God or any authoritarian figure, to tell you how you can live. That's the sum and essence of what I have to say. I see this Rona fraud, the Great Reset program, as the greatest opportunity for human beings to be liberated from their illusions of freedom and their illusions of having rights and their illusions of the need to have rights. And on the other side of this fraud, there is a great beauty to come. That is the beauty of a society based on agreements and not rights. a society based on responsibilities rather than rights. And that society has never existed before. But the opportunity to build it now from the ground up, one person at a time, is facing you, is facing me, is facing every single one of us who has the honesty and the guts to look at it. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.